Okay, let me see if this works. It says that I am streaming, so it seems to be working here. It says live, but it is not counting anything yet. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Okay, so it works. This is an unexpected stream. I just posted the announcement 15 minutes ago. So hello everyone. Of course, I am Protesilaos, also known as Prot. I have been meaning to do a live stream for a long time now, but I could never make it happen because of various reasons. Sometimes the weather was bad, and when it's raining, you can hear the rain. This is not a studio over here, of course, so it wouldn't be good for the purposes of video production. Other times my internet connection was intermittent, so I couldn't make it happen again. I couldn't log in, and always there was something to do with my Emacs packages, so I couldn't do that either because I had to commit to those tasks. So anyway, you get the idea. Time flies, and here we are. I want to I want to make a few announcements. So I expect this to be a short stream. Also, I don't think anyone will show up given this short warning. But I have the live chat here in case anyone posts a question. And if there are questions, I will answer them. Otherwise, this will work as any ordinary recorded video. So I have prepared some announcements over here, and we can proceed to them right away. The first one is that I am making some changes to the completion UIs in the Modus themes. There is a user option called Modus Themes Completions. You can see it over here. And I am refactoring it so that it accepts an A list as a value, whereas now it only accepts a symbol. Hello Zolt, nice to see you here. Of course you caught the stream even though it didn't come with a prior notice, but I will get to the chat in a bit in case you have any questions. So hello here, thank you. So I will get to the chat and see if we can talk. So anyhow, last week, and actually this week, I released version 2.1 of the themes. It was a major release, more than 100 commits, and the changelog is close to 5,000 words, so you get the idea. But there is this part about the completions that was left over, so I am doing it now, and there will be a new release, version 2.2, that will be available in the coming days. Normally, I tag a release, every month or so. So this is out of the ordinary, but I think refactoring Modus themes completions is of paramount importance. It makes everything more robust, more powerful, more flexible. It won't be backward compatible, so you will have to update your variables to adapt to the new style. But I think going forward, it is the best for everyone. What distribution of Linux I use? Arch Linux, and if I were not using Arch, I would be using Debian. Those are the two distros that I have hopped between since 2016, the summer of 2016, when I switched to free software. So this is the part about the Modus themes. So just to get that out of the way, the details will be covered in the changelog. So expect everything there. Of course, there will be documentation. You are aware of how things work, so I won't bother you with the minutiae. Next up, there is LibrePlanet 2022, which takes place in a few weeks. LibrePlanet is the annual event organized by the Free Software Foundation, and it is all about freedom in software and related themes. So I will be delivering a presentation which will be about Emacs and the general theme of what it means to live in freedom, what it means to actually experience freedom, and instead of just talking about software freedom in abstract, actually living in freedom. So most of that presentation will be philosophical, so it will be theoretical in nature. It won't go into the details of packages or what workflow to implement, and you get that idea. It will be general, so you can watch it for years to come and it will still hold true. I have a link here to LibrePlanet. Of course, there is a link to this text on my website. I posted it in the description of this video, and I will find it again and also post it here in the chat if you need it. I cannot say any more about this presentation because the schedule is not yet released, the schedule for the event. So please stay tuned and I will post the announcement on the coding blog section of my website, so the code log as I call it. So that's it. Next up is that I have taken the decision to stop making Emacs tutorials or demos. Instead, I will only be talking about Emacs in relation to some wider theme, such as what I will do at LibrePlanet. This does not mean that I will stop doing Emacs videos, but I will stop doing Emacs videos about packages, workflows, and stuff like that. So it will be, from now on, whenever I talk about Emacs, it will be more general in scope. This has to do with the fact that since the time I started doing videos on Emacs, lots of things have changed. I have become more experienced as an Emacs user, and the packages that I share have attracted many users, which means that the maintenance work for them has increased, and this means that the time I commit to them is already more than it is actually covering most of my free time. So this means that I cannot do Emacs related videos and also maintain Emacs packages because then I won't be able to handle everything. So from now on, I will be focusing on maintaining my packages. Of course, I am not going anywhere, so I will be focusing on that. And then occasionally, whenever there is something about Emacs and I do a video, it will be general in nature. An aside here, because this is a question that I keep getting in my email correspondence. About a year ago, I removed use package from my .emacs, and in its stead, I implemented some of my own simplistic yet functional macros. The reason I did that is, of course, because I wanted to simplify my config, though that's just the superficial aspect of it. What motivated me, what prompted me to do that is because I wanted to make my setup harder to reproduce. This may sound like me coming off as an elitist, but this is not what I wanted to do. I wanted to raise the barrier to entry because practically every day I was getting a question which was low effort. The person who was asking that question was not doing any kind of research. It was quite apparent that they were not putting the basic amount of work. I'm not asking you to read the manual for 3 months and then come to me, but at least put some effort into it. So anyway, by removing use package, by making that kind of change, I was able to sort out the low effort questions, and that allowed me to have the free time for actually addressing the real questions that I get in my email. And of course, if you have ever emailed me, you know that I always reply, and my replies are always detailed. I never try to avoid questions. So I wanted to commit to something that adds value instead of doing low effort stuff. And this is consistent with what I have always maintained, the position I have always held about not spoon feeding users. I am always in favor of high quality documentation about helping newcomers start out with Emacs from zero to hero, as we say. I always want that. What I don't want is to treat people like babies, and this is one of the reasons why I also removed use package from my config. Not that use package is bad, it is an excellent piece of software actually, but I hope you understand what I am saying here. So that's it. And then the last part is that I have started producing some presentations on philosophy. I have already published 2 of them on my channel. The last one I did is about an hour long, and the other one maybe 40 minutes or something like that, I'm not sure. But the idea is that I plan to do more of those, more somewhere between 40 minutes and 1 hour. It will depend on the subject, of course. I won't hesitate to go 1.5 hours or 2 hours or however it takes, depending on the subject matter, but generally somewhere between 40 minutes and 1 hour is what I am targeting. And the themes that I will cover will be broad. I already have written about those, and once I cover everything that I have written, I will venture into new topics. Hello, good morning. Finally managed to catch you live. Thank you very much for your invaluable videos. You are welcome. You are welcome. So I am concluding now this presentation here, what I had to say, these announcements. So just a few things about my philosophy, how I do philosophy. I always try to express myself, to communicate in a way that is understandable to a general audience. I may use some technical term from time to time, but I always try to explain it in context. I don't try to incorporate jargon in my in everything I do, not just philosophy, but in general. And if I do, I always explain what I mean, because I think it is important to use language as a medium of communication and not a way to obfuscate the meaning, to impress the audience, or some other ulterior motive that has nothing to do with philosophy per se. So this means that I don't care about other things that are not specific to the substance of the philosophy that I am doing. So I don't care about certificates, other figments of social status, professorial palaver. You get the idea. I want to do philosophy in a simple way, to live philosophy in a simple way, and this is also made manifest through the language that I use. So anyway, there will be more videos on philosophy going forward. I have already written the text in at least 3 of them. There is a 4th one which is mostly complete, but I'm not sure how to add some parts to it, but don't worry about it. So I have already written the text for them, and it's only a matter of time of finding the right moment to record those videos. Obviously, I understand that those of you who have subscribed to my channel did it on the assumption that I will be talking about Emacs, so you may not care about philosophy. This is perfectly fine, no problem, no stress. So of course this means that if you want to unsubscribe and search for alternatives, now is a good time, because this will be the focus going forward. Maybe there will be the occasional Emacs related video or a live stream like this one where I will also be talking about Emacs, but as I said before, there will be no more video demos or tutorials related to Emacs. So that's all I had to say, folks. As I said, I wanted to make a presentation, a live stream for a long time now, but I couldn't manage it. And now, for whatever reason, I had the chance, so I thought I would do it now or never. because time passes and I want to put this information out. I don't want to be opaque. I want to be as transparent as possible. Actually, I wanted to talk about these themes earlier in January, but whatever. So as I said, the text of this presentation is available on my website. Maybe we can search for it, and I can put it here in the chat as well, in the code link. Sorry. It is here. Let's see. We have it here. So I will also post it here. But it's also in the description. Maybe I can pin this so that you can see it. Message pinned, but I don't see it here. Maybe, oh no, let's leave it there. But anyway, so you will find it also in the description, so no worries about it. So that's all. If there are any questions in the chat, I am happy to answer them. As I said, there wasn't an announcement. I couldn't schedule this in advance because I don't know if I would be able to commit to it, because there are always variables at play, and I cannot really commit to a deadline many days in advance. So that never works. And I assume this hour here, it is 1:45 here in Cyprus. In Europe, it will be like 11:45 or earlier, depending on the time zone. So of course, that's not a good time for many people. So yes, that's about it. And what is there? Yeah, I said what distro I use already, Arch Linux. And yeah, you are welcome for the invaluable videos. So I don't have something else to say. So I will wait a bit longer if there is something else in the chat, or I will conclude this. Of course, this is being recorded as well, so it will serve as a video recording. That's why I didn't worry about it if it is an otherwise short live stream. So what we have here, I didn't talk about this, but it's not important anyway. The Modus themes completions will be refactored into an A list, so it will look like this, where extra bold is a weight, font weight, and you can specify any kind of symbol like light, semi-light, extra bold, semi-bold, and others. They are referenced in the doc string. Modus themes weights is the variable. And also there will be this form as well, so you can pass to it a fallback value, so a list that will affect all the associations in case they are not explicitly referenced. So yes, I think I will close this stream, folks. Thank you very much for your attention. Okay, there is one question here, but let's discuss this and see. Hello, Zain. I love the philosophy videos. However, I find myself getting lost very easily. Because more philosophy content is coming, how do you recommend us getting into a philosophy mindset? The mindset that applies to philosophy is the mindset that I think applies to Emacs and to anything that requires a degree of sophistication. And that is that you need to focus on what is being presented to you. Whether that is some talk or some text, or a manual, in the case of Emacs, a documentation string, you always have to pay attention. So there isn't really, philosophy doesn't have a special mindset. You don't need to have a special mind to be a philosopher. You just need to pay attention to what is being discussed. What I can say about what I am talking about is that if the presentation, the video format does not help you, if it for whatever reason, if you for whatever reason need to go back and reread it, you can check the text of the presentation, because in the text I always start out with definitions. So for example, I did a video where I talk about cosmos, logos, and the living universe. And the first question, just by listening to this, is, okay, what is cosmos? What is logos? What are those words? What do they mean? What are you trying to say? So in that presentation, I start out with defining cosmos, defining logos, and then building up from there. So in my case, at least, you don't need to come into this with any kind of prior knowledge. You don't need to have studied philosophy for 4 years, for example. Of course, if you have studied philosophy, that's better for you, but that's not a requirement. If you want to transition now to reading philosophical works, it depends on the philosopher. There are some philosophers which are very difficult for beginners, others which are better for beginners. Of course, better for beginners does not mean that they are not profound. For example, Platon has everything that he has written is in a dialogue format. I think the dialogue is easier to follow as a format, and Plato also uses fairly straightforward language, so there isn't some kind of difficult concept that you cannot understand. Everything is discussed in the dialogue. So I think if you want to start with philosophy, Plato is an excellent point of entry. Plato is also excellent in terms of substance, not just the format, but I will let others be the judge of that. So hopefully this helps. Of course, now more generally about mindset, about philosophical mindset more generally, I would say that it is what we say in everyday language, to keep an open mind. When you are presented with something you are not familiar with, the usual reaction is to have a reaction to it that you are negatively predisposed. You try to say, okay, this cannot be possible. I will reject it. So what philosophy invites you to do, what you learn to do by living philosophically, is to entertain other views. And this means that you listen, you don't necessarily agree, you listen, you try to think of it, you think of it from their perspective, from another perspective, and you reach a conclusion afterwards. This means that you are what we call dubitative. This means that you doubt, you have a disposition of remaining doubtful towards things. You are dubitative, and then you continue questioning, you continue researching, you continue asking questions and wondering how things are. So this means that you are, in addition to being dubitative, you are inquisitive. So you inquire upon the state of affairs, the substance, the subject matter. So you are dubitative, you are inquisitive. There is a third part of this philosophical mindset, if you want to call it, of this disposition, which is being open to discussion. So if somebody comes to you and puts forward an argument, you will listen to that argument. You won't dismiss it in advance, provided they are willing to do the same. So your counter argument will also not be dismissed in advance. So the idea is, through this discussion, you are trying to find what the truth is. You are not arguing for the sake of the argument, for who wins the argument. That's not the point. You are arguing for the sake of finding together what the truth is, or maybe not the truth in the objective sense, but at least an approximation of it, at least some more clarity than what we have before starting out. So we have dubitative, inquisitive, and this third aspect is what we call dialectical. Dialectic means basically to have a dialogue in this rigorous sense of listening to the other side, accepting their arguments, entertaining them, but also them entertaining yours. So it is mutual, it cannot be one-sided. If it is one-sided, you cannot have dialectic, you have just an ordinary argument, and that doesn't lead anywhere. So we have those three, and there is a fourth quality of this philosophical mindset, which is what we could generally describe as courage or plain spokenness. So you speak your mind without hesitation. You think about you being in the classroom and the professor says something that doesn't sound right. You will raise your hand and say, "Excuse me, may I speak? May I say something?" And the professor will say, "Yes, please," and you will state your objection or disagreement or alternative point of view, etc. This kind of attitude, this kind of courage and plain spokenness means that you are committed to saying what you really think. You don't have any ulterior motive. You are not saying it for the sake of sounding like you are a smart guy, or you are not saying it to impress your peers and to trick someone or whatever. You are just saying it because you think it is the truth. And of course, if the other three are already met, so dialectical, inquisitive, and dubitative, then the other person will see that you are speaking the truth, or you are speaking your mind rather, and will see that and accept it. So this fourth quality comes with the Greek word. We can write it, maybe we can have just a throwaway buffer. Let's increase the size a bit. So the Greek word, which exists also in English, is parisia. And parisia literally means presence. But more generally, it means to have the courage to stand up, stand up, and the courage to speak the truth. Speak the truth, what you think of it, what you think of it, what you think of it. So what you think is the truth. To not trick people. So you are standing up to say what you really think, and you have no ulterior motive. So these are, let's write them all here. So dubitative or dubitativeness, inquisitiveness, dialectical, we don't have a dialecticalness, so ness, and parisia. We could say courageous, plain spokenness. Let's have it like this. So this is the philosophical mindset, and I am putting it in quotes because I don't want us to say, okay, we have those four, so therefore we are doing philosophy. But if you have those four, you are already on the right path. So I answered that. Let's see the next. Since you are interested in philosophy and politics, I wonder if you have published something on Brexit, if you have any strong views on it at all. Maybe I did. I used to have a blog on EU related affairs. I wrote extensively on the EU, especially before switching to free software. But even afterwards, I would write about European Union politics. Brexit in particular, I don't think I ever wrote about it at length. Maybe I have a few opinion pieces, but they are not necessarily up to date with how things developed and what was the end result of Brexit. I think Brexit is important for the European Union. Of course, for Britain, it is important as well, but let's start with the European Union because part of the agreement is, I don't want to get into technicality now, but part of the agreement is that basically the European Commission itself has a committee, let's call it a committee, which is responsible for the relations with Britain. This is significant in terms of the European integration process because it provides more competence to the European Commission, more power basically to the European Commission to do something that would normally be an intergovernmental affair. In the European Union, we talk a lot about intergovernmentalism. Let's have it here. EU, European Union. Sorry, European Union. We talk a lot about intergovernmentalism or intergovernmental affairs, politics, etc. Politics, etc. Intergovernmental means between governments, and in this case, between governments of the EU member states. Between governments of the EU member states. So many decisions in the European Union are taken on an intergovernmental basis, or at least have a strong intergovernmental component to them. They are decisively intergovernmentalist. So in the case of Brexit, we have this committee that is responsible for affairs with the United Kingdom, which is not intergovernmental. It is directly part of the Commission, the European Commission, European Commission, de facto EU government, but we don't say that. De facto EU government together with the European Council. Maybe one day I can do a presentation and explain all those technicalities. So the European Commission has this committee which is directly responsible for affairs with the United Kingdom, and this is not intergovernmental, but instead it is supranational. Supranational, let's have it here. Supranational means above the national level, meaning EU member states. So it's above the national level of Greece, Germany, France, etc. And it's directly European. So the national governments don't have any direct involvement to that committee. This is of paramount importance to the future of the European Union because it sets a precedent. It means that if we have a supranational committee that effectively does foreign policy, let's name it for what it is, why not have other committees to do foreign policy? So, of course, it is foreign policy with a clear trading focus, a clear economic focus, but that does not change the substance. If you can talk about border issues with relation to trade agreements and whatnot, you can talk about border issues with relation to military affairs and other issues. So it doesn't really change. It's a matter of continuing on the same path. So from this point of view, the European Union is actually setting up itself for a long-term expansion of its powers. And this may sound ironic given what Brexit was supposed to do, have the UK leave the Union and in the process trigger a cascade of effects that could, in theory, destabilize the Union and make it weaker as a result. Instead, we are not seeing that. We are seeing the opposite. Not on its own, there are other issues as well. that contribute to that, but let's not talk about EU politics at great length. So that's it. What about the UK? I think the UK, of course, can benefit from Brexit. I'm not in favor of Brexit, but I'm also not against it. I am mostly indifferent. And the reason is that the UK was already with one foot outside the Union, because it was not part of the Schengen Agreement, which is the free passport area in the EU. It already had an exception. It wouldn't have to join the euro. It had its own currency. It was not part of the how do you call it? I forget now the technical word for it. But anyway, the police and judicial cooperation. There is a home and something to do with police matters. In Europe, the governments cooperate, but the UK was not part of that close cooperation. And that also has to do with the legal order in the United Kingdom, but let's not go into that. So the UK was already not the most eager member of the EU, so them exiting the Union doesn't really change that much for the average citizen in the United Kingdom. Of course, there are parts of the UK, such as in Scotland, which were pro-EU, so we will see whether the UK will be destabilized because of Brexit, and whether we could have recrudescence of the referendum for Scottish independence, and what will happen with the case of Ireland and so on, Northern Ireland and so on. But that's speculation at this point. What really matters is that neither side has really changed. The EU over the long term is benefiting, even indirectly. The UK is not losing, I think, and may benefit from its ambitions of a global Britain or however. So we will see how it goes. Also, the fact that we had this pandemic raging and devastating the world kept borders closed, so we couldn't really see the effect of Brexit from day one. So we will have to wait and see, because borders would anyway be closed. There will be checks, and you know how life in the pandemic is, so this has not changed. So we will see how it goes. What do we have here? The next point. Sadly, philosophy has no eval that tells me exactly when I'm wrong. Yeah, that's of course the problem, and this is actually how I managed to learn Emacs and programming, because I always learn through trial and error. So I start with something, I see if it works. If it doesn't, I try something else until it sticks. And if it works, I'm like, okay, it works. Let's move on. And when I learn something, I can come back and review the code or whatnot. I think this playful part of learning is quite enjoyable. I really like it. But of course, it is true that when it comes to philosophy, we don't have that. Of course, you don't have that in most things that you learn. You always have to put in some effort, which is not interactive in nature. You have to read, you have to study like that. So, of course, to become an expert, or maybe expert is the wrong word, because what does it mean to be an expert in philosophy? What does it mean to be an expert in open-mindedness? It doesn't sound right. But to reach any kind of sophistication with everything that you do, let's say you want to play the guitar or learn a new language or whatever you're doing, you have to commit to it. You cannot, this is what I am also saying about Emacs. You cannot be an Emacs tourist. You cannot pick it up for a couple of days and say that now you learn how to use it. The same applies with philosophy, with learning music, with speaking a foreign language, with everything. So even though we lack this interactive way of learning, it still is something that it is not too bad if you start with, if you keep in mind what I mentioned earlier. It is not too bad. You can take it slowly, and you will gradually see how you are learning. Another thing about philosophy is that, at least this is true for me, because I never studied philosophy in a formal capacity. At the university, I was studying politics, economics, and law. Then I got a job at the European Parliament, where I was doing political work. I was amending legislation, and I was dealing with technicalities of, let's say, political slash technocratic slash bureaucratic nature. So there was never a philosophical component or aspect to what I was doing. So I started to think in philosophical terms through my reading of politics and economics and law and that sort of thing. Because, for example, you are dealing with economics. Let's take economics as an example. And there is a basic distinction that economists make between the macro economics, as they are called, the macro scope, where you try to look at the bigger picture, and the micro scope, so microeconomics and macroeconomics. So there is, for example, the phenomenon of inflation. Inflation refers to a rise in the general level of prices as recorded by a special index, the so-called, what is it? How do you call it in everyday words? The household goods, let's say. It is a basket of goods. That's the word I was looking for, a basket of goods. So inflation reflects an increase in the price of this basket of goods. So your purchasing power diminishes the higher inflation is. That's the basic idea of it. So inflation is a macroeconomic phenomenon. However, macro, where is the macro? So who caused inflation? Let's put it this way. What are the fundamentals of inflation? What are the fundamentals of this phenomenon? What are the fundamentals of every phenomenon at the macro level, not just in economic terms? So of course we have to look at the micro foundations. The micro foundations in turn are not distinct from the macro, so they don't exist in separate worlds. They are the same reality, and we conceptually analyze them as if they are different. So we say that there is the macro and the micro, and they relate to each other. But in reality, it's the same thing. We are always studying the same reality, and we are analyzing it. So analysis, let's have this word here, analysis means to mentally, let's put it this way, construct, I cannot type anymore, construct mental representations of patterns. And these are supposed to have a standalone presence. So for example, standalone presence means I am treating the macro scale, so macroeconomics, as if it exists on its own, as if. That is very important, because in reality, I have to do a synthetic analysis. I have to understand the micro in order to think about the macro, and vice versa. And if you want to be really synthetic, I have to think in political terms in addition to economic terms, in legal terms in addition to economic terms, in social terms, in historical terms, in cultural terms, and so on. So if you really want to understand what is going on at the macroeconomic level, you really have to also think about all those other magnitudes. So you cannot afford to be analytical in the narrow sense of just finding some pattern and studying it on its own. You have to look at the context. at the milieu, at the reality in its broader scope. So these are the kind of thoughts that influenced me and basically brought me to philosophy. So I actually haven't read a lot of philosophy. People ask me, what do you think, for example, about the Stoics? And I say, I haven't read them, so I can't really speak about the fact. What do you think about Nietzsche or Hegel or whoever? I have not read them. I don't really have a strong opinion on the matter. How could I? I have mostly learned to philosophize through science, if you want, through other things, through the humanities, through economics, through my work in Brussels at the time. And of course, other things that I observe in life, the behavior of people, or something that may surprise you, but the behavior of animals. By studying, for example, dogs, the behavior of dogs, you will be surprised how much you can learn about humans. But let's not elaborate on that. So all those things contribute towards a philosophical approach to things, where you start to question what we call the abstract structure, what I call the abstract structure. So, as I said, with the macro and micro level in economics, what is the abstract structure? What is the relationship between the micro and the macro? So when you start to think in terms of relationships in abstract, you start to do philosophy. And let's say, I don't know what your profession is or what your background is, but let's say you are a programmer. You will be surprised how many philosophical insights have a direct translation in programming. And I think good programmers will make for good philosophers, and vice versa. Good philosophers can become good programmers. And the same, of course, for other disciplines as well. If you are an economist, again, let's say, you will be a better economist if you can also think in terms of those relations that I said. So you won't be just a macroeconomist, maybe that will be your expertise, but you will also understand the micro, you will also understand social affairs, political affairs, the cultural backdrop in which, against which those unfold, and so on. So yes, that's how I came to, I arrived at the scene of philosophy. Of course, I am also reading philosophy now, more than I did when I started out with philosophy, but still not as much as other people. There are other people who have read practically every major philosopher and know all the technicalities. I don't. I do philosophy, which means that I mostly practice it, and reading it is also interesting, but that is not the first priority. Not to say that reading is bad, but I think you get what I am trying to communicate. So, next point. Dan says, hello, by the way. The Cosmos and Logos essay was fantastic. Thank you very much. The next presentation, I'm not sure if it will be the next for sure, but maybe it will be the next, because I have already written it and it's only a matter of making it happen. The next presentation will be about, let me actually write this as well, will be about relativism, and this is a tricky word, but you will understand what I mean when I do it, and cosmopolitanism. And I can already hint, Protagoras and Diogenes are two ancient philosophers whose insights I will mention. However, what I will expound on is my own interpretation, my own thoughts. So it's not what Protagoras actually said or what Diogenes actually said. And of course, Protagoras, I bet, though I am not a betting man, but I bet his friends also called him Prot. So there is that. Let's delete it. So yes, I will talk about cosmopolitanism. So yes, what I said about Cosmos and Logos will extend to other presentations as well. So for example, Against the backdrop of that presentation of Cosmos and Logos, you will understand better what cosmopolitanism really means, and it has nothing to do with what we use the term for nowadays, where, for example, we say, oh, I eat at Italian restaurants, I drink German beer, I travel to Asia, and I live in the United States, therefore I am a cosmopolite. That's okay, that's perfectly fine, but that's not what we really mean when we say politis tu kosmou, so citizen of the world. I will explain this in the presentation, so let's not go into that right now. And there will also be something about relativism and, by extension, objectivity. Objectivity. So this is not the title, but you get the idea. It will be something along those lines. So I will do this presentation as soon as I can. I'm not sure when I will record it. The text is done already. Hopefully next week we will see. Sam's videos says my favorite Cypriot, referring to me. So thank you about that. I hope I will stand up to that, because it's not easy. Right now I live in Cyprus, but I didn't grow up here. I was born and raised in Greece, and I lived there for 18 years. I have been now in Cyprus for, what is it? Oh wow, it's 7 years almost, 7 years. So that's quite a bit. And I live in the mountains of Cyprus, so my association with Cypriots is at a minimum, because of course I am an introverted person. I don't really talk much, which is kind of strange, because here I talk all the time. But I don't talk much. I am not really a social animal. I am a bit, but not too much. So I don't really interact with a lot of people. And I live in the mountains, which are anyhow sparsely populated. So there is that as well. But of course, Cyprus is a lovely place. Both communities of Cyprus, the people who are Greek speakers, the Greek Cypriots as they are called, and the Turkish Cypriots as well. Currently, the political situation is a bit complicated, but I think despite the political differences, I think the people have a lot in common, and the politics don't really make much sense for the Cypriots. They make sense for the powers that want to interfere in Cyprus, but that's another discussion. But for the Cypriots themselves, the current state of affairs doesn't make much sense. We don't have anything that keeps us apart, and this kind of division is to our detriment. And an interesting point here, I'm not sure if there is any Cypriot in the chat here. I'm not sure, Sam, if you are familiar with the Cypriot accent, in case you are not Cypriot. But there is the Cypriot accent, both the Greek and the Turkish one, is you can really tell it apart. It's fairly unique. So I was listening to a Turkish Cypriot speaking. I don't speak Turkish, I don't understand Turkish, but I could tell that they are Cypriot because of their accent. It was the same accent as with Greek Cypriots, and I was impressed because these are two different languages and somehow they have the same acoustics in terms of their accent. So I thought that was very interesting, but of course not surprising given the history, but still very interesting. So that's a bit about Cyprus. Thank you for your answer on Brexit. On a totally different note, do you have any mental models that you use in daily life to address problem solving and decision making? Oh yes, of course. I actually had an email correspondence recently about this topic. Sometimes I ask whether I can publish my response. I publish those on my website, and I always anonymize my correspondent's identity, so that we focus on the substance rather than the email itself. So I had this conversation a while ago, but I didn't ask to publish it. Maybe I should have done so. The general idea is to try to take a step back. Whatever it is you are doing, you have to take a step back to look at the bigger picture, to understand what are the factors at play. The factors at play. And what I mentioned in my first philosophical presentation is what is, let's call it like this, what is the constitution or composition or makeup not in the sense of what we put on our face, but in the sense of how it is made up. Makeup of the case. So what are the factors? What are the factors that contribute to let me write it out, that contribute to the state of affairs? So you have to take a step back, you have to be aloof from the fray, take a step back, and try to understand what those factors are. So you have to you have to make a distinction between, once you understand the factors, once you understand them, once you find the factors, separate them to two. Those you control, those you do not control. So when you do that, you will immediately clarify the situation, because you will, for example, let's give some concrete example. Let's say that you are going to work and the weather is terrible. There is snow everywhere. Your car cannot go on the road because it is too slippery. It is impossible for you to go to work. Your reaction in that situation, let's say you are a model professional, you are conscientious in what you do, so you really want to be on time, you are never late, you never fail your assignments or whatever. You are the best you can be at your job. But there is this situation with the terrible weather, and it is impossible for you to be on time at your work. Should you worry? Your instinctive reaction, because you really care about it, is to be, oh, what should I do? I have to call this and that. I have to do something. I have to find a way to get to my to the office or whatever. This is wrong. You don't have to worry about it, because the weather is not under your control. It is also what we have. There is this concept also in legal terms, force majeure, but I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it, I'm writing it right. But basically the force of nature. Force of nature. So basically, not in my control. So there is this concept as well in law. So something happens which is outside my control, basically. So if it is outside my control, worrying about it, thinking about it, actually doesn't make sense. If you say that, oh, I really worry about the snow on the road, I have to do something about it. You cannot do anything about it. It still snows, it will keep on snowing, it will keep being slippery, and so on and so forth. So no matter what you think about it, no matter how much energy you expend about it, it still won't change the underlying reality, okay? So because it doesn't change the underlying reality, you are wasting your efforts. So it makes no sense to do that. So you have to focus on what you control in that situation. And when you do that, when you approach things in this way, you will always be more relaxed. It will be as if ice is running through your veins. You will always be calm and composed. Calm and composed is not something that you get from birth, it's something that you can learn. And this is one method of doing it. Another method of doing it, another method of thinking about situations in general, about the constitution of the case, as I said over here, is to have a baseline scenario. Let's have it like this: baseline scenario and baseline scenario and alternative scenario. So you start with the fewest possible assumptions and gradually add more assumptions per scenario. So this is the other idea. So we can translate this basically plan A, B, C, and so on. Okay, so everything you do in life, you have to have a plan A, B, and C. Not in the sense of overthinking it, not in the sense of organizing everything in advance and being a control freak, because remember, you don't control everything, but in the sense of starting from the basis, the baseline that has as few assumptions as possible. If you start from something that has as few assumptions as possible, you will always be in a position of strength, in a position where you are not failing because you are not surprised by the outcome. Let's take one example with today's video, because I announced this video 15 minutes in advance. My baseline scenario was that there would be no live chat. This is what I expected. So then on top of that, I could add other scenarios, such as, for example, there will be a few people in the chat. What should I do then? There will be lots of people in the chat. What should I do then? We will be here for 2 hours. What should I do then? And so on and so forth. So this is, again, something that it helps you. This helps you not surprise yourself. Helps you keep expectations in check. So when you keep expectations in check, you always are at a point where you recognize what the reality is. Of course, this extends to many other things in life, how we handle expectations, because expectations are actually what can destroy us. It can undo us. It can force us into, they can force us into submission. Because expectations are something we don't understand as being external to us. We think that if there are expectations about my performance, about my job, about whatever, about my role as a member of a family, as a member of society, whatever, these are not in our control. Expectations usually have to do with what other people think, which is outside our control, and what we internalize from our interaction with them. So by keeping expectations in check, we avoid problems such as disappointment or, at its extreme, depression. We avoid depression by essentially being realistic. And this may not, the connection may not seem obvious, but I think it is. Because let's say again about this video, let's say that you are expecting 1,000 people to participate in the chat. Let's say that I came into this thinking that there will be 1,000 people here talking in the chat. And there are no 1,000 people here. So what happens in that situation? I am disappointed, of course, because I expect something. The reality is completely different. The mismatch between my expectations and the reality causes friction, so to speak. This friction is made manifest as disappointment. This disappointment is then rationalized as me not being good enough, or someone else is to blame, something is wrong. And then you have negativity. And when you have negativity, whether it is of a self-deprecating nature or externalized, when you become nihilistic, when you say, okay, nothing matters, I'm not to blame for anything and whatnot. When you have that, you already get trapped in a cycle that is vicious. So one bad thing brings another bad thing, and these invigorate themselves into more bad things and so on. So you don't want to have that. You want to keep expectations in check, and in a sense, this means to have a baseline scenario for everything you do that is as close to reality as possible, as few expectations as possible. Then, of course, you can have your plans and dreams and whatnot, but always know what the baseline is. So these are some ideas about how you can have a mental model about everything in life, basically. These apply to specifics, but also you can have them for more general issues as well. So they can help you in your problem solving and decision making. Not to say that this is exhaustive, of course we can elaborate at length, but I think this is more than enough to get you started. Where are we? Here, wide-ranging and well-put answer. Thank you. You are welcome. Dan says, I remember studying Protagoras many years ago in my senior high school days. Looking forward to that presentation. Really, you did that? We had no reference at school. There was no reference to Protagoras whatsoever. There was no philosophy class whatsoever. We didn't cover any of those themes. And after I graduated from high school, I learned that they had introduced a course in philosophy, but it was not philosophy. There was, let me have it here. There is a dialogue. Plato or Platon has a dialogue called Protagoras, and it relates to the philosopher of the name Protagoras. Protagoras, this class at school the theme was how do we say it? Interpretation of Plato's Protagoras. So this was the classroom, the class that they had in high school, and this was supposed to be a philosophy class. Instead, it was philology of the worst kind. It was literature, but the bad kind of literature, the one that no one cares about, the one where you have pedantic scholars dealing with irrelevant technicalities, with points that no one cares about, that have no significance in your life, that you cannot use in anything that you do. It's a complete waste of time. It is, if this is philosophy, it is the kind of philosophy you don't need. It is the kind of philosophy that is extremely boring and that is extremely out of touch. It has nothing to do with life. Philosophy, how I talk about it, how I live in accordance with it, is something that has immediate application. When we study philosophy, we can make our life better. For example, what I said here about plan A, B, C and stuff. This is philosophy. It's not something magical. It is thinking in abstract terms. You don't have to delve into the textual technicalities of an ancient text and try to find some hidden truth in a special word and if there is a comma or whatnot. This is silly. But I don't want to sound negative, because I am not against textual interpretation. I am not against analysis of that sort. It is of paramount importance that we have that as well. But that is different from doing philosophy. And this is why Socrates, who is the protagonist in Plato's dialogues, Socrates was, of course, an ancient philosopher. Socrates, in all those dialogues, speaks in plain terms with people. And this is significant because they are not studying a text and they are saying, oh, look, there is a comma here. Maybe this has some profound significance for the universe as a whole. Therefore, we have to really look into it and whatnot. They don't do that kind of pedantic exercise. They are talking the way ordinary people talk, and the language has to be understood is in those terms as a medium of communication. That's why it has to be simple. That's why we want plain spokenness, as I said earlier. Technicalities have their utility, of course. We want to be technical in many areas of expertise in all fields of research, but when it comes to the substance of philosophy, when it comes to communicating ideas, we want to focus on the idea and not what the Greek system of schooling was doing, which was not productive. I don't think there are many philosophy enthusiasts out of that class, that came out of that class. I have to say similar things about the grammar and the use of language, by the way. Let me mention this and then we can proceed with the discussion. In Greek, of course, Greek is several thousand-year-old language. So we have ancient Greek, we have medieval Greek, we have modern Greek, and all sorts of variations. And we also have different accents. First, about the variations. There are many verbs in Greek. Of course, modern Greek comes from ancient Greek. Okay, so there is a continuum. So if you can read ancient Greek, you will find lots of ancient Greek words and ways of structuring sentences that also exist in modern Greek. However, if you try to construct a verb, for example, in an ancient Greek way, which is perfectly valid in Greek, it is perfectly intelligible in modern Greek, and if you try to submit that in class, you will get an error. The professor will mark it as an error because you are not writing in modern Greek syntax. And I say this is a disgrace and a scandal that we have that kind of pedantry in our schools and in our public sphere more generally. Because language is, in essence, it is a living organism. It is something that evolves, something that is fluid. And what is language at the end of the day? Something that we use to communicate. We don't have language for the purposes of being dogmatic. Oh, look, you didn't use modern Greek constructs, therefore I have no idea what you are saying, which is silly. You know what I am saying. For as long as language performs the function of communication, for as long as you understand what I am saying, everything else is irrelevant. And seriously, I don't care about any kind of pedantry of that sort. I really don't consider it valuable. The other thing is with regard to accents. And here I can bring up again the Cypriot accent, the Greek Cypriot accent, which I think is better than the ordinary Greek accent in more ways than one. For example, now I will use English words, but the same applies in Greek, so please work with me. So, for example, we have, let's have it like this. We have, for example, papa. Let's have it like this. So there is a Greek word called, I will write it in English, an English character. So we have an English word called like this, papous. And this means grandfather, grandfather. In ordinary Greek, when you pronounce this word, you will pronounce it as papa, and then papous, papous. So you are pronouncing it as if it has one P over here, as if there is only one P over here. Whereas in Cyprus, they pronounce it as, and this is the correct way, papous. Okay, I said it slowly, papous, papous. So it sounds like this, papous. So in this regard, Cypriot Greek is more correct than Greek. There are many words like this, many cases where Cypriot Greek helps you understand how a word is written. Because if you are a foreigner and you listen, for example, to the word papous, okay, you just listen to this and you go to write it, assuming you know Greek alphabet, or you write it in English, in Latin characters. You will write it with one P because that's how it sounds. But if you listen to the Greek Cypriot dialect, you can tell that it is not a single P, it is a prolonged sound. The same for all sorts of constructs, so I don't want to delve into this kind of issue. But of course, I have an opinion about this as well. I think Cypriot Greek is better than Greek for many things, and here in Cyprus, they try to introduce the ordinary Greek dialect in schools and in television, which I think is wrong. What is good with any language is, of course, to enrich it. We want to have more literature, we want to have more words, and so on and so forth. But you don't want to kill the culture. You don't want to erase the history, because by discontinuing a dialect, you are discontinuing the cultural trajectory of a people. Because the other thing is that in Greek Cypriot, there are lots and lots of words that come directly from ancient Greek, which we don't find in mainland Greece. For example, if a Greek Cypriot asks you to look at something, they will use the word that we have in English for scope. I will explain what this means in a second. So they will say scopa. I will write it with a K. So they will, let's write it with a C. They will say scopa, means look. If you say this to mainland Greek, they will not understand what you are saying, because this is not used in modern Greek. But this is definitely Greek. It is ancient Greek, and of course you know this from English words as well, such as micro, scope, periscope, telescope. These are all Greek words, okay? Micro means small, peri means around, and tele means from a distance. So telescope, you see from a distance. Periscope, you can see around. Microscope, you see the small scale. Macroscope, the large scale, and so on and so forth. So scope, of course, we also have the word the scope itself, right? We also have that. Scope in English, we mean basically what we are currently viewing, what we are currently considering, or, as I said before, the constitution of the case, if you want to be more abstract. So, of course, again, this is another case where Cypriot Greek is better than Greek because it is truer to its nature. And if you are trying through the education system to erase the dialect, you are erasing all the history embedded in the language, embedded in this dialect. and of course I don't approve of that. So yeah, of course I ran on a tangent here. I'm sure many of you have no idea what I'm rambling about, but anyway. Next point, where are we now? Yeah, so I was this about Protagoras at school. So I hope they taught Protagoras in a philosophical way. But however they did, I hope it did not alienate people from philosophy. What I will do in my presentation is mention Protagoras, but basically what I will talk about is what I think. So because we don't have the works of Protagoras intact, we have some fragments, so we can't really be sure what the ancient philosopher actually said. So we have to be honest and say that we are the ones talking and not Protagoras. So more on that in the coming days. Sam says, very interesting about the accents. I can't believe you are not a social butterfly based on how well you speak here, your prior work in politics. I was a misfit in the world of politics by all standards because politics, here is the thing. I am, let's say, better. I won't say I'm an expert, but let's say I am good with the written aspect of politics or the theoretical aspect of politics. So I was very good with amending legislation. I was very good with that side of thing, or with being politically savvy to understand the motivations of people, what could be incentivizing them, and so on and so forth. So for all those theoretical things where you don't have face-to-face interaction, I was competent. I could do those stuff. But I could never get used to it. I could never be good at it. I didn't like, for example, small talk. You may think that small talk has nothing to do with politics, and that's where you are wrong. Small talk is the most important thing in day-to-day politics. It is the single most important thing, because the politicians or their assistants who engage in small talk divulge information, and this information is of paramount importance in understanding the other side and politicizing, doing things accordingly. Of course, so for example, you walk down the corridor, and you have a colleague over there. So they will tell you, they will try to start some small talk. How was your weekend? And I say, good, see you. Or good, and you? Fine, okay, see you. So I would do that kind of interaction, whereas someone else who is politically savvy in this sense would be, oh, I had a great weekend, I went here, I did this, I did that, I was listening to this, blah, 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 blah. The other person will say, okay, and I also did those other things, and they will be talking for about 30 minutes. And along those 30 minutes, they will also discuss something that has to do with their work. Maybe not directly, maybe indirectly. So they will discuss those things. Whereas I was like, okay, let's run away as quickly as possible. Let's go to the office and just get the job done, and let's leave afterwards. Same principle for parties. I never joined a political party. Parties in both sense of the word, actually. I never joined the political party because, of course, I always have my own opinions, but also because I'm not interested in the social aspect of it, and also in the sense of making connections and through connections getting to places. I never went anywhere because of that, and I actually quit my career because of that. So anyway, the thing is that I never joined the political party, but also the parties in the sense of the festivities, of the activities that people do. I also was not fond of them. I didn't like them. I never liked parties. I like to be in a small circle with people who I know. I really enjoy that because we can have a meaningful conversation or just have fun. It doesn't have to be something important. We can just talk about silly things. It doesn't really matter. I'm not the kind of person who has to talk philosophy all the time, or be a nerd, as we say. I am not a nerd. I don't consider myself a nerd. I am interested in general things, what every kind of person would talk about. But it has to be someone I know, because then you have a familiarity and you can express yourself without being misunderstood, without that kind of hesitation. So there is a sense that when you are with strangers, even if you want, you cannot really be yourself. You have to engage in role playing. You have to be someone else. You have to be what they want you to be, or at least something in between. Whereas with people you can be yourself, and the better you know them, the closer to your actual self you will be. So I was never interested in parties slash festivities, and I would avoid them assiduously. So run away. Of course, sometimes I couldn't avoid them, so I had to go, and those times were always a grind. It was really, really tedious. I really disliked them. And when you have to do that, there are many times where in the world of politics where you have to do that. For example, you have to join a social dinner. Presumably it's just for dinner, but of course they always talk about politics. So you have to join a dinner, you just want to have something to eat and then stop thinking about politics the whole time, but they want to do politics. So you are forced into that situation and you are having a terrible time, but you're like, okay, I have to endure and see how it goes. So in that sense, I really am not a social butterfly, as you say. But I am not shy. There is a distinction to be made between being introverted or recluse or whatever and being shy. Because there are many people who are actually extroverted. They are people-oriented, but they are shy. They hesitate. But once you give them you give them the room for initiative, they flourish, they become, they come into their element. Whereas I am not shy. No matter how much room you give me, I will always be reserved and kind of in my own world, so to speak. Hopefully I don't sound like like a strange fellow. I am sociable, but not for the sake of sociability. I am interested in having friends. I have friends. I want to be friendly, but not for the sake of friendliness. So that sort of thing. In other words, I want to be honest. I don't want fakery. I dislike fakery with every fiber of my being, if that makes sense. So, of course, fakery and politics are almost synonymous. So you know how that ends up. You can figure it out. Where are we? Okay, next point. Insightful as always, Prot. I cannot help but wonder, when you are not at your day job writing essays and presentations, what does leisure Prot do to de-stress? I live in the mountains, so I hike a lot. I walk a lot. And hiking, walking, running, that sort of thing. So it is not uncommon for me to walk, run, hike, etc. more than 20 kilometers per day. It is not uncommon. Of course, if the weather is terrible, if there is snow or whatnot, I won't do it. But if the weather is fine, if there isn't something else that obstructs me, then of course I will go out, and that is the best way to recharge your batteries, as we say, because when you go to nature, when you venture into a forest, when you climb up a hill or a mountain, you really disconnect from the world. You really see the world as it is, without any of that fakery that I just mentioned. So you have none of that, none of those obligations, social responsibilities, what your neighbor thinks, none of that. You just have nature, and you can enjoy solitude, but the kind of creative solitude which lets you gain perspective, because you understand that whatever happens in your life, it is not really the epicenter of your life. There is something greater, and so you want to see the bigger picture. You don't want to be always focused on day-to-day trivialities. You want to keep a sense of perspective. So in this sense, being in the mountains helps a lot. When I used to live in a city, when I used to live in Brussels, for example, I would still go for walks. My house, my apartment at the time used to be about 45 minutes away from my office, but I would always go on foot, unless, of course, it was terrible weather. I would always go on foot, and I would always come back on foot. So that's already 1.5 hours of walking per day. I would always walk during the weekends. If there is any Belgian here, you may already know the distance between Brussels center and Waterloo. Waterloo is famous from history, from Napoleon, of course. So anyway, it's about 15 kilometers. And I went to Waterloo several times on foot and came back on foot. So it's that kind of thing. In between Brussels and Waterloo is a forest called the Sonian Forest, Forêt des Soignes. And the Sonian Forest is an actual forest. So you can go through the forest and reach Waterloo, actually. You don't have to go through the main road. So I would do that. I would I would head towards Waterloo, but go through the forest. So that would take the whole day, and it was a great experience. So yeah, that's a sort of thing. So next up, where are we? Okay, distress. So Dan says, our philosophy class was really a history of philosophy, more from the ancient Greeks all the way to the 20th century. So of course, nothing in depth. But still, that's good. That kind of lesson, that kind of class where you get an overview is really helpful, because you understand what the main themes are, what the main problematics. Let's have this word written, by the way. Problematic. This comes from French, and it means the research question. So what we are currently thinking about, what we are currently focused on. So it is good to understand what the problematic is, problématique in French. So it is interesting to have this historical focus, this historical overview rather, not focus. And because you get a sense of the broader themes, and then once you have a sense of history, you can always focus on something specific that you are interested in. And I think if you are doing something else, for example, let's say that you study law, for example. If you are studying law, maybe you will want to read, for example, now I'm not sure how it is written, HLA Hart. Let's say that you are reading HLA Hart. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the name of the author. I forget it right now. Let's say you want to read HLA Hart on the matter of legal theory. So you have this, but then you know from the history of philosophy that, for example, Aristotle, which should actually be written as Aristotelis, and I think this is very important, but I will talk about this in a second. For example, you know that Aristotle also talked about law, and actually as a legal scholar, you can learn a lot by studying Aristotelis. And you can also learn, of course, from Rawls. I forget the name of Rawls, by the way. The American philosopher, John. Let's have John here. I'm not sure if it's John Rawls, but okay, you know what I mean. There is one Rawls that is a philosopher and also relevant to law issues. So, of course, by having this sense of perspective, you can always figure out what you are interested in. Okay, next up. Indeed, the amount of pedantry regarding grammar and pronunciation is atrocious, ironically enough, usually by people who aren't... by the way, sorry, because my view here, let's put it this way. Okay, I have OBS here on my side, okay, like this. So you can see it, okay. Yeah, I can read this again. The amount of pedantry regarding grammar and pronunciation is atrocious, ironically enough, usually by people who aren't particularly knowledgeable on the subject. Yes, it is usually people who aren't knowledgeable on the subject, and it is their way of hogging the stage, of their way of talking for the sake of talking without contributing anything of substance. I'm not saying, by the way, of course it is understood, but just to make it crystal clear, I'm not saying that we should abolish grammar and just say whatever we want. Of course, we want to have grammar, we want to have some structure so that we can help with the communicative aspect of language. But it is important to understand what comes first and what comes second. It is important, as we say in English, not to put the cart before the horse. You want the horse to come first and then the cart. The horse has to pull the cart, not the other way around. So, and this means in practice that you want language to serve as a medium of communication and then as whatever it is in terms of style or whatever. That has to come second. So yes. How many languages do you speak? I speak Greek, of course, that's my mother tongue, English and French. I also know Spanish, but because I have not practiced it in many years, it is difficult for me to speak. But if I listen to people speaking in Spanish, I understand practically everything that they are saying. If I read something in Spanish, I also understand it, but it is very difficult to speak if you are not in the habit of speaking. And because speaking is kind of like exercise. It's the same thing with running or lifting weights or whatever. If you don't practice and you try to do it, you will find that it is very, very difficult. You might want to run for 5 minutes and then you will have to catch your breath. But if you keep doing it, you can run for an hour and still be good. The same is true for language. The more you speak, the easier it is to be lucid, to say what you want to say. And I don't do that with Spanish, unfortunately. And actually, this is one of the original reasons I wanted to do videos about any kind of subject, because it was my way of speaking English, because no one here speaks English. It would be ridiculous for me to go to my neighbor and speak with them, converse with them in English. That would make no sense whatsoever. So, of course, my only outlet, my only way of having some association with English is this. And if you go back and watch some of my earlier videos, for example, on BSPWM, you will see that I had more difficulty speaking, even though my English, for the written English was basically the same as it is now. So, okay, I'm a bit better now, but basically the same. What has changed is the style of expression rather than the command of the language. When I speak, I still make mistakes, but if I see something in written form, I understand what the error is, but sometimes I still commit that error while talking. So yes, I also understand the Italian, but not to the extent that I understand the Spanish. I know Spanish quite well, Italian not so much, but it is intelligible. I understand a lot. And I also understand Portuguese, and this is because I used to work with people from Portugal. And here I will say a joke since we are here. Let's also write it now. Let's write it down. So in Portugal, there is a city called Porto. Porto, and this is north of Portugal. To the north of the country, there is this city. It is, I think it is the second largest city in Portugal, second largest, I think, by the way, I'm not sure right now. First is Lisbon. So I had a colleague and a good friend of mine, one of my favorite people. I would laugh all the time. So I had this colleague, and he was telling me, man, you really have to come to Porto. It is an amazing place. I'm telling you, you will have the time of your life, the best city in Portugal, the best place in the whole Iberian Peninsula, the best place in the world. You know, people from their town always try to speak highly of their place. So this friend of mine was telling me how awesome Porto is, and that I should visit it. I had already been to Portugal a couple of times for business purposes, for work purposes rather, but I only went to Lisbon. So we were having this discussion of going to Porto as a holiday trip, not for work. So I was like, oh, tell me about the sites, tell me about life in general. And my friend was telling me how awesome life is there. And then he was like, okay, I know how to convince you to come to Porto. And I will tell you about one special recipe that we have, which is called francesinha. Let me look it up, maybe I can look it up. Francesinha. I think, I'm not sure if I am typing it correctly. Okay, right away. So we have francesinha, this recipe over here, and I won't open it, but I will let you open it because I think it's not something that I want to show. Sorry, there is my face again. Let's have it somewhere here. It shouldn't be a problem. So my friend is telling me about francesinha. Let me copy this here. And let's delete that. So, and he was saying, man, we have this amazing recipe. I'm telling you, it is the best kind of food you will ever eat. So he was like, do you know what croque monsieur is? And I say, okay, yes, I've heard about it. It is a French recipe that has to do with it's a toasted sandwich, and it has an egg on top, right? And he says, yes, it is like that, but better, because francesinha has a layer of bread, of toasted bread, with ham inside of it, then another bread which has sausage and steak and beef and cheese, and then another layer which has more cheese and more sausage and more ham and more so on and so forth, and then tomatoes, and then yet another layer of cheese, and so on. And he was explaining francesinha, how it has all those ingredients, and I was like, my friend, what you are describing now is the enemy of all that is healthy. You cannot expect me to come to visit you in Porto and eat that kind of thing. I was like, okay, this is an over the top. So yeah, so that's the kind of joke. And of course, I didn't visit Porto for other reasons, but I will joke that francesinha was the real one. So there is always that. Porto is a great city. I live about 2 hours away from there, in Galicia, northwest of Spain, and have visited many times. Okay, that's very interesting. Are you from Galicia, or you just live there? My understanding is that Galicia is their accent or their dialect rather is closer to Portuguese than it is to Castilian Spanish, and this of course is makes perfect sense if you look at the history of how the modern day countries of the Iberian Peninsula took shape, and it makes perfect sense. It is Galicia, in case you don't know, it is to the north of Portugal, so it is the northwestern part of Spain. So I think Galicia is Galicia, they would say in Castilian. But so I think that is their language is closer to Portuguese. So that's all I know. And I also know that historically there are many parts of Spain that have a strong Celtic history, an ancient Celtic history. Celtic, let's have it here, Celtic, sometimes pronounced as a Celtic. It can be pronounced like this. Oops, what happened? So it can be pronounced as Celtic or Celtic. So it's Celtic. So the Iberian Peninsula has a Celtic tradition, and I think Galicia is one of those places. Vigo, of course. I'm not sure about La Coruña, but it has, of course, Celtic influence, of course. So that would be very interesting. I would really love to visit the Iberian Peninsula. I would really want to go through all those different parts of the country to experience them. Not the country, the region, sorry, because I don't mean just Spain, I also mean Portugal. Because there are lots and lots of interesting places that are really informed by centuries of tradition. Of course, in Spain we also had the presence of the Moors, so of course Muslims, and this has and the Moors were a very advanced culture, a very tolerant culture, and of course their civilization is something that we should take inspiration from, to say the least. And of course I would like to visit all those places, Granada, Seville, and of course the other places to the north, the Basque Country, Catalonia, and of course Galicia, and so on. And Portugal, Porto. So where are we? Where did you live in Germany, and when? I lived in Germany only for a few months. It was I forget right now. 2019. I think it was 2019, 2018, towards 2019. It was a few months around the new year, around the turn of the year. I lived in West Germany. There is, I won't say exactly the village, exactly the name of the village, but there is an area that is called the R River Valley. I think it's called, it's a river valley, it's called that way. The R, so the R. Maybe it's called Ireland, I'm not sure. But I lived in a village there. I've also been to Bonn. I think Bonn is written like this. Bonn. And actually, when I was in Bonn, if anyone is in Bonn, you can check this on the map to see the distance in kilometers. There is a place called, I'm not sure if I'm writing it correctly, but you can find it, Ippendorf. This is Bonn, okay? There is Ippendorf, and from Ippendorf, you can go to the center, the bus center. Center. There is, I think there is one bus center for, actually, was it bus center or train center? I'm not sure right now. But there is a public transport center that is close to the main bridge. The main bridge which extends over the Rhine River, close to the bridge, close to the Rhine. So whichever center is close to the Rhine. And from there, I went to the Rhine's, how do you call it? Maybe you call it like this, Rhine Promenade. Maybe you call it like this. Deutsche Sprache, schwere Sprache is what the Germans would tell me. So Dutch is a difficult language. That's all I know. I think you have it like this, but it's basically the walkway by the Rhine. So I went from Ippendorf to the bus center or train center, whatever. Let's have it bus or train. And from there, I went to the riverbanks, to the walkway by the Rhine, and headed towards the place opposite Königswinter, and back, and all the way back. I came exactly how I went because I could memorize the route. So you can find this on the map, how many kilometers it is. I think it is more than 32 kilometers. So it is more than 32 kilometers. I have the dogs here being excited. It's my dog and also my brother's dog. So sorry about the commotion here. But yeah, it was more than 32 kilometers of walking. Rhine Promenade. I'm writing it wrong, so you are right. It's how do you have it? Okay, let's have it. Let's spell it correct. I had it the English word, so it's Rhine Promenade. So yes, and I covered that distance. It was wonderful. I really liked the park you have there in Bonn. I forget the name of that park, but you know what I'm talking about. It's the park by the Rhine, and it was very nice. And also the whole walkway, I really enjoyed it. I was impressed by how easy it is to walk there. I can imagine people going for a ride with their bicycle. So cycling for, I wouldn't be surprised if people could cycle for 100 kilometers. I wouldn't be surprised at all. There was also a place further down. So if you go from Königswinter further down, I forget the place. I forget how it is called. If I remember it, I will write it here as well, but I forget the place. You have to go again another 30 kilometers, and there is another place over there. I also went there, but I forget right now. So there is a Königswinter, and right before or right after, there was the, I forget the name, Bad Budentag, something like that. Something that had to do with Bad. Bad, which in German means bath. Okay, so it was a bad something. So there was that as well. So yes, this is my time in Germany. So I didn't live there for long. I would like to live in Germany. I really like the country. I really liked it. I also liked, of course, Belgium, the country as a whole. I really enjoyed it. It is one of my favorite places. Lots of interesting places in Belgium. Just to name a few, since we are here. Okay, I am rambling now, but just to name a few. Some places in Belgium. Places in Belgium. Places of interest. So, of course, you have the capital. But then we have, for example, Namur. We have Liège. We have Leuven. We have Ostend, which is I forget Ostend, maybe like this. I forget how the Dutch spelling is, but you have this. You have of course the, how do you call it? Orval Valley. You have another place I went to, Tongeren. There is some accent there. Of course, Antwerp. Let's put it second. Antwerp. So this is not actually. Let's have it in in alphabetical order so that we don't upset anyone. And these are some of the places that are very interesting. You have, of course, many others, but Bruges, of course, Bruges. Let's have it here, Bruges. Bruges is very nice, and it also has the College of Europe there, which means that many people who are related to European politics have studied in Bruges. Personally, I don't care about that. The city itself is very nice. So Bruges, of course, also the suburbs of Brussels are very nice. Some of those suburbs had a very bad name when there were these attacks at the time of the Charlie Hebdo incident. You know what I mean? So these neighborhoods had a bad name, bad reputation, but I think it is not deserved. They are fine neighborhoods, fine suburbs. What was I forget the names right now because it's been a while. If I remember them, I will include them here. But so yes, there is always that. Bad Breisig? No, I think it was another one. But yeah, if I remember it, I will write it down. We can't see the left of the screen. So you couldn't see this, you mean? So what happened? Maybe I did something here wrong. I did something with sorry about this. I did something wrong with OBS. Maybe if I bring it a bit. No. Okay, sorry about that. I can see that you can't see the first letter. So you know what we can do. Of course, this is Emacs, so let's have it like this. Let me decrease the font size a bit so that we can have it like this. So I think now you can see everything. Okay, so we are, where are we? Okay, I shouldn't have done that. But okay, let's keep it like this. I saw something, but I missed it. Let's see what we have. What others? Some scholars even consider them the same language, just two dialects. So this is in relation to Galician and Portuguese. I think this is correct based on what I have heard, but of course I'm not knowledgeable in the matter, and I would let others share their thoughts on that. But yes, I think this sounds true. So another person says, Yasu Prot, another Galician here writing from Ireland. Of course. Hello there. Hello to Ireland as well. So of course, what I was saying earlier that Galicia, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I know, Galicia and other parts of Spain have an ancient Celtic tradition. So of course, the Irish also have a Celtic tradition, obviously. So I guess there is that connection as well. But otherwise, my regards to Ireland. So where are we? Galician Unite, of course. Your profile picture looks like a self-portrait. Is there another one, a bearded version like Leonardo da Vinci's in the work? It's not a self-portrait. I am not a painter myself, but there are people in my family who are painters, so of course it comes from there. I can share more at some point, but not right now. There isn't another portrait, but there should be one, because this portrait is from the profile picture is from maybe 2015 or 2016, so it's very old. So of course I didn't have a long beard then. Actually, I had a long beard and I shaved it, and then they took the portrait. So that was unfortunate. But I shaved, and then I got a version of myself after I shaved, which is a pity. No, I'm kidding, but I'm just saying. So there should be a new one. Actually, I will make sure it happens at some point, and I will update my profile picture accordingly. I don't know if I will keep the long hair and the beard, by the way. I don't mean to communicate anything with those. It is the reason I actually didn't start growing my beard is because of health concerns. Because I would have to shave daily for work, and because my facial hair grows very quickly, I would have actually to shave twice a day. It wasn't uncommon to shave twice a day, and of course this is very bad for the skin because you have to apply aftershave lotion, you have to apply, of course, the cream or whatever for the shaving itself, and that means that you can irritate your skin. So I didn't want that because I would always end up with razor blades all over my neck and whatnot, and it was feeling bad. Apart from looking bad, it was feeling bad. It hurt me. Okay, it was a form of injury. So I didn't like that. So I said to myself, okay, let's let it grow. Let's see how it goes. And here we are, basically. Same for the hair, because I used to do a buzz cut, but then I thought, okay, let's let it grow and see what happens. But of course, I don't mind. I don't do this as a fashion statement. It's mostly for health, and then because I am also a bit lazy with this sort of thing. So yes, that's it. Where are we? Hi, just joined. I think the display is clipped on the left a bit. Yes, I think I fixed it now. Sorry about that. I'm not sure if it was like that the whole time. So yes, I have some text here. Maybe I can go to the top and you can pause the video or take a screenshot and then rewind and see what I was saying. Maybe, I don't know, this can help. Let's leave a space here at the top so you don't have... Why are you doing this? So that you don't have that. So okay, I will scroll one screen full at a time and you can take pictures of it. I'm giving you a second. I actually filled the lines and I see that it messed up with my line breaks or whatnot, because I'm not using it. This is the fundamental mode of Emacs, of course. So of course I wasn't paying attention to that and it messed up with the formatting. So where are we now? Okay. So yes, it was clipped. We can't see. Okay, we covered that. Never been to Bruges myself, but after watching In Bruges, great movie by the way, it's on my permanent list. The city itself is beautiful. Of course, it is a very picturesque place and I highly recommend it. It is a wonderful place. But also the other... where is Belgium? Here, it's right at the end. These are also wonderful. I like them all. If I had to single out one, I would have to say Namur. If I had to pick one, but I cannot pick one. I like them all. But if I had to pick one, it would be Namur, because there is a river in the city, and there is a hilltop, so you can climb up the hill, and from the hilltop you have a view of the river, you have a view of the city, and it stretches out to the horizon. It is fantastic view, especially during spring or summertime, because you have all that lush greenery extending all the way to the horizon. And if you go there at sunset, oh, that's lovely. That's simply lovely. But of course, there are all the other places are very nice as well. Kalimera says, Kalimera, I am replying. It's Jedemax. Gemadux. Okay. Kalimera then. So again, payers, about one letter wide column is clipped on the left. Okay, we covered that. Bad Honef. No, I'm sorry, John. I forget about it. Uh, Maybe do you have something like I'm not sure if it's this, but it sounded like this. Bad Gutenberg or Gutentag or something like that. Something like that. I don't remember it like now. If you write it down, I will recognize it, but I don't remember it right now. Uh, the person here asks in Greek if this is a lesson about Emacs or about hair, and I think this distinction is not always clear because you can always get into hairy situations when you use Emacs. So there is that. But what I talked about, in case you didn't watch the presentation, is here. These are how do we call it? The contents. So I also have a link here in the chat. I pinned the message, so you can visit this link and check the text of the presentation, or you can watch it again later. Yes, I explained what I had to say. I made the announcements, so you can check that as well. So what do we have? Okay, so this is the last point. And I think we've covered a lot. I wasn't expecting this to be so long, but we covered a lot of ground. Let's wait a couple of seconds in case, a couple of minutes, in case John knows the name of that place that I have here referenced. It doesn't really matter, of course, it makes no difference. But the point is that I was in that part of Germany. And I really liked it. I really liked it, but I couldn't stay for a number of reasons. I see that my dog is now chewing on some cane. I don't know where he found that thing. So he went outside, he picked the cane and he came to chew it. And this is his way of saying that we should better get going. He wants to go for a walk. And of course, our walks are 1 hour long or more. So we really like to be active. And I think actually this is another irrelevant point. Last point, if we don't have something else in the chat. brothersilos.com, let's come here. On dog-related misconceptions. So I wrote this essay as well, if you are interested. And I address some of the common questions or misconceptions that I get about dogs and how to handle dogs, how to be with dogs. So I have written about this. So for example, does your dog bite? And I explain what the issue is with this kind of question. So of course it is it is close to 3,000 words. So there is that as well. Something about the locking jaws, the myth, the lie rather, of the locking jaws that that circulates out there about certain breeds, about raw meat and whatnot. So yeah, there is that as well. So if you are interested, I have written something about this, but it doesn't really matter. If you don't care about dogs, that's fine. So let's see what we have. I am from the UK, but studied in Leuven. It's called Leuven in Dutch or Louvain in French. But I pronounce it Leuven. I pronounce it the Dutch way. I absolutely loved it. I also absolutely loved Leuven. I visited there a few times. I went there also in 2013. There was Professor Jürgen Habermas who delivered a speech, the presentation there. And I went to and I attended that presentation, and it was very nice. I really liked the city. I went there a few times again. I really liked the city, but I also liked the university, the university campus over there. The whole thing. It was very impressive. I really enjoyed it. What breed of dog? He's a crossbreed between an American Pit Bull Terrier and a German Shepherd dog. He looks like a pit bull, but in terms of disposition, he is more of a shepherd dog. Of course, if you know about dogs, you know that shepherd dogs, in order to be good as shepherd dogs, they have to have a high prey drive. So he gets the prey drive of the pit bull in addition to the prey drive of the shepherd. So you have a dog who is who doesn't let anything move around without paying attention to it. So it doesn't matter if it is a rodent or a bird or whatnot. He will always be, fully focused on the potential prey. So yeah. But of course, as with all breeds, with all dogs, I also cover this in the essay that I just mentioned. The disposition of the dog is a matter of training. So my dog here is a good boy. He is not doing any kind of trouble because he is, one, trained that way, and two, the other very important thing is that the good boys, good dogs, good boys or girls are those who expend their energy. So if you have quality time with your dog, if you go for walks, etc., you have a good dog because they are tired. If they are not tired, if they have a lot of energy that has been built up and they get bored, then they can be destructive. But they can also be destructive because simply they want to go out. So there is that as well. So in my case, my dog is a model citizen because he is well trained, but also because I spend quality time with him. What do we have? No, do not know, but thanks. Yeah, so these are not bad. These are not relevant. I could check the map and tell you, but it doesn't really make a difference. It's inconsequential. So I think we covered a lot of ground, folks. I wasn't expecting this. I posted the announcement for this video 15 minutes before producing it, but no, none of those. Forget about it. Doesn't matter. I posted the announcement for this live stream 15 minutes before, and I wasn't expecting it to be so long, so here we are. And socialized, very important to the dog. Yeah, of course, yes. Socialization is of paramount importance. I mentioned this in the essay that I wrote. For me, if you want to make a very quick test about whether someone has trained their dog properly or not, is whether you can take something out of their mouth. So if you can open your dog's mouth at will and take anything, not just a toy, it can be anything. It can be a juicy bone or whatever, the most delicious food or whatever. If you can take it out of their mouth, then you have a dog that you have trained well. If you cannot do that, that is a problem, especially for large dogs. If it is a small dog, it is a problem again for the dog's own safety and for the safety of other people potentially or other animals. But it is especially important for large dogs, because if you have a large dog that does not listen to what you are saying and does not know how to behave, then of course you can run into problems very, very easily. And these are problems that have to do with your lack of responsibility or lack of attention as a canine handler. So you don't want that. You want you don't want to set your dog up for failure. You want your dog to be a good citizen and for you to have a good time with your dog. So of course, socialization is key as well. So I think I will close this chat, folks. We have been here for more than 2 hours, it seems. So I think I will close now. I was expecting this to be a short stream, so I am happy that it turned out this way, of course, but I didn't expect it. So as I said, the text of this presentation that I made is on my website. There is a link here. There's also a link in the description of the video. The video is recorded, so you can always go back and review it. I took some notes here. They are I reformatted the lines, so they are a bit out of order, but it doesn't matter. You can find everything. And if something is unclear, you can always contact me. Of course, I will see you around. I will continue to do live streams from time to time, depending on my availability and if there is something interesting to talk about. Otherwise, as I said in the opening part of this video, I will be transitioning towards videos on philosophy. So that's all for now, folks. Thank you very much for your attention and for joining the chat and for your time. Take care. Goodbye.